always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Entertainment Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and this is the last ever entertainment podcast of June 2019. Yep, it's the last day of that. That wasn't as dramatic as whatever. It is June 30th, which means that we are halfway through 2019. Tomorrow starts July. July is a big month in my family. Family reunion, hubby's class reunion, my mom's birthday, my niece's birthday. That same niece is going to Europe, so I have to be insanely excited and proud and nervous for her about that. She's 15. She'll be 16 while she'll turn 16 in Europe. How cool is that? Yeah, what else is in July? So many things. So many things I can't even remember them all. But July is going to be a busy month, and I am looking forward to it. But then I might need a nap in August. At any rate, that has nothing to do with today's podcast, although we are going to start with some stories that involve reasons to celebrate. We're going to start with the couples who got married over the weekend. June's a very popular month for weddings, of course, and this weekend it seems to have been something of a popular month something of a popular weekend for celebrities to get married, because Zoe Kravitz, Sophie Turner, and Katharine McPhee all got married this weekend. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, didn't Sophie Turner already get married? And yes, this was their second ceremony, which did not get live streamed this time, so they're probably pretty happy about that. And apparently they all got married in Europe. So not only was it a great weekend to get married, it was a great weekend to get married in Europe. No one told me, except that I'm already married. But hey, maybe we could have renewed our vows in Europe. No one told me. Also, I'm not a celebrity. Anyway, Katharine McPhee married David Foster in London on Friday. Zoe Kravitz married Karl Glusman in Paris on Saturday, and also Saturday in France. Sophie Turner married Joe Jonas. So I guess, when it's the last weekend in June and you want to have a June wedding, you gotta cram those in. But in Zoe's and Sophie's cases, they had already done the legal marriage in the U.S. and then married again in France, which, sounds very romantic, and can't wait to see if there are pictures, because that just sounds fun. So Zoe Kravitz's wedding, was at her father's mansion in Paris. Pays to have an incredibly famous father who is able to have a mansion in Paris. That just sounds awesome. According to this article, guests were spotted arriving Saturday to that home in Paris, and many of those same guests attended the couple's rehearsal dinner, which included, of course, Kravitz and Zoe's mom, actress Lisa Bonet. Of course, Lisa Bonet's husband, Jason Momoa, was there. Kravitz's Big Little Lies co-stars Laura Dern, Shailene Woodley, and Reese Witherspoon were also in attendance, as well as director Sam Taylor Johnson and her actor husband, Aaron Taylor Johnson. This is the home is described as an extraordinary 3-story, 8-bedroom, 18th century mansion in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. It features an immense side and back garden and was once owned by a government minister. He has owned this home for 13 years. He maintains a shoes-off policy. Good for him. Don't be tromping around Lenny Kravitz's mansion in your shoes. That's just awesome. At any rate, this is where the couple got married, and it just sounds really fun. And again, I hope that there's pictures, because that seems nice. And there is actually one picture of him with no shoes on. Good for following your own policy there, Lenny. He posted on Instagram a picture of himself bow tie untied, no shoes, sunglasses, looking very Lenny Kravitz-y, which is fun. I don't mind that in the slightest. At any rate, it seems like it was a great weekend for celebrities to get married in Europe, and who can blame them? If you can do it, do it. Another story, this is related in terms of not weddings, but Sophie Turner, that she has recently praised Maisie Williams as a most wonderful friend and has opened up on how Game of Thrones toughened her up. I would think the schedule alone would toughen you up, not to mention trying to disassociate yourself from all the things your character went through. My goodness. But she recently praised Maisie Williams for being there for her growing up in the spotlight. As has been mentioned numerous times before on this and other places, the two are very good friends and have been since starting to film Game of Thrones together. Sophie Turner is 23, and 22-year-old Maisie was one of her maids of honor at that ceremony. So in an interview with Psychology's magazine, Sophie said, "Maisie has been the most wonderful friend to me over the years. We grew up together on Game of Thrones, and we have shared so many things and talked about everything." Sophie added that she hoped she has been supportive of Maisie too. And the height difference in these two always cracks me up when I see them. Maisie, how tall is Maisie Williams? I should look at that up, because I don't know if Maisie Williams is that short or if Sophie Turner is that tall, or if it's just a combination of the two of them. Turner added, "We both leaned on each other during those times when we felt out of place and a little lost. It's been so good to have such a great friend like her around, and we are still very close." She also said that playing Sansa toughened her up. She said, "When you're starting your career at a young age, you're forced to grow up much faster," which is true. And also, playing a character like Sansa and having to endure all the things she did toughens you up. Yeah. Fans of the Stars were wondering where Maisie was ahead of the French ceremony, as she posted some snaps of a trip on the London Underground on Wednesday afternoon. But, of course, she was then there in time for the wedding, because you can be in London and still have plenty of time to get to France. It's not that far, as opposed to, if like you're in California and you got to get to New York in a really quick hurry. At any rate, we are going to move on to, we're moving to a different kind of celebration, and that is that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are going to, of course, have little baby Archie's christening in the last many, I don't even know how many, I shouldn't try to say few or many, but in the last, let's say, couple of decades, christenings have been kind of public affairs, if not public as far as, they're not live streamed or anything, but, they're pretty public affairs. There's lots of pictures, there's lots of comings and goings and everything, but they are wanting to host the christening for their son at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, where they got married and where Harry was christened in 1984. But Archie's baptism will be a completely private affair, they told royal sources told the Sunday Times. This means no fan gatherings and, more importantly, no candid photos of the child outside. The palace has not commented. Hopefully, we'll still get to see pictures of Archie. And if the royal couple does what they normally do, they will carefully control what pictures are released. They will probably use their Instagram account and select the images that they would like to release of that day and of their son. Also, traditionally, the royal family releases its own portraits from christenings after ceremonies. Those are usually amazing. I mean, just the sheer size of the family and how they situate everybody and the baby and his or her incredibly elaborate long baptismal gown. Love it. Foregoing public appearances and photo ops outside christenings isn't unusual for members of the royal family. Of course, William and Catherine were pretty open with theirs. There were pictures of all three of their christenings, and you saw, kind of not maybe candid snaps, but you saw pictures that were taken outside of the venue. They also debuted their kids publicly by appearing with the then newborns outside the hospital hours after their births, although Princess Diana and Prince Charles did the same thing when Harry and William were born. So that's kind of it seems like it's a little bit of an heir to the throne kind of thing, or, first in line, that sort of thing. At any rate, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were also photographed with their parents, Sarah and Prince Andrew, outside before and after their own christenings. So there is, precedence, but there's also precedence for doing it the other way, and it's every couple's choice. Meghan and Harry have yet to appear with Archie in a public place, or show his full face. We did see he was very wrapped up when he was presented shortly after his birth. The Father's Day photo had Harry's hand over most of his face, and apparently, according to one quote, privacy is incredibly precious to Harry, more so than to almost any other member of the royal family. As Archie is not an HRH, His Royal Highness, he feels he has every right to strictly police his son's privacy. And who can blame him? I mean, it can't have been easy to grow up in the spotlight like he did, and have everything he ever did splashed over. There's also I'm just scrolling through quickly at pictures of christenings, both candid and formal, from years past. Oh wow, all the way back to Queen Victoria. There's a lot of really interesting pictures in this article. At any rate, there's little baby Eugenie. Cute. Okay, but you can't see what I'm looking at, so I will stop scrolling and talking randomly while looking at pictures. I will ogle on my own time, and I can do that during the break. So we are taking our first break of the podcast. When we come back, one more royal story, and then some, other entertainment news. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Entertainment Podcast, and I will be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Entertainment Podcast. Before the break, I was talking about little baby Archie's upcoming christening, and that it will be private. In other news from Harry and Meghan, they recently announced they will take their first official visit as a family to Africa, I think in the fall. Another announcement was made, this time involving Prince Harry and Kate Middleton, about Prince William, excuse me. That would be weird if it was Prince Harry and Kate. But that they are also they've also announced an autumn tour to Pakistan. So details about that, according to the communications office who announced it, this was last Thursday. The Sussexes, that's Harry and Meghan, would be doing a tour of South Africa, and that Harry would then travel alone to Malawi, Angola, and Botswana. The announcement was expected. Then the Cambridges announced that the Cambridges announced their fall tour. They are going to Pakistan. The KP, that's Kensington Palace, announcement was this: the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge will undertake an official visit to Pakistan this autumn at the request of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And before I talk more about that, I just realized that I was looking at a different article than I originally was looking at. And this one's really snarky, saying that, so Harry and Meghan made their announcement. And then just as they released the pictures of themselves at the baseball game that was held in London over the weekend, then the Cambridges have to make their announcement. And I don't know, I kind of don't think that that's how it's going to work, because the palace and the royals seem to pretty tightly control these things. I don't think that the sibling rivalry would get to play out in this way. I really don't know. But Kensington Palace office announced it, and they announced it late on Saturday evening. This article says it had to be to step on the Sussex's news cycle. I don't know. I really don't know. So much snarkiness involving the brothers. Whatever's going on between the two of them, and maybe it's nothing and maybe it's something. Just let them figure it out. They will figure it's like your kids. Unless they are smacking each other or pushing each other down the stairs, let them work it out. You can't always figure these things out on your own. Let's move on, because the royals, who knows. We're moving on to some advocacy stories in this next segment. Don Cheadle, who is part of the MCU, the Marvel Universe. He was in Captain America, Civil War, other movies, but I tend to think of him from other movies and other TV series, especially the one that my husband watched, which was House of Lies, where he was not a nice person. He was kind of despicable in a lot of ways. But I love Don Cheadle as an actor. I think he's amazing. He is actually... So his character suffered a spinal injury in Captain America, Civil War, and he now hopes to see more opportunities for actors with disabilities. He said at Ace Comic-Con in Seattle, when asked if his War Machine has seen response from people with disabilities, he said, "I have. People have asked, what was the takeaway from that? Did I consult with people? And obviously, yes, I talked to people who have had spinal injuries and how to deal with that and how to portray that. People have reached out to me with regard to that." And in fact, there's been a kind of movement about getting more actors with disabilities to be able to represent and play themselves on screen, which I think is very important to continue to do. He continued, hopefully those opportunities will expand and grow. He then said, seeing people's responses, and when people come up and say it meant a lot to them, the character and the way it was portrayed, dealing with what he has to deal with after obviously what happens in Civil War, and that he comes back and that he's able to stand strong again with his cohort and to make the thing happen, that's always very rewarding. And that's the experience I always get from fans. But one of the most rewarding things is also this sort of family that we've created over all these years, and we get to keep returning to, and every couple of years things have happened in people's lives, families and kids. This is 10, 11 years that we've been doing this, so it's always nice to have a reason to come back to in our busy lives and revisit this space again with these guys that have become family, which is really sweet, and it sounds like they have a great relationship, and it's probably a lot of fun to film these and a lot of hard work. But I really appreciate that he used this opportunity to advocate for actors with disabilities to be able to play those roles and represent their community on the screen, whether it's big screen or small screen. Often when we portray characters with disabilities, we get able-bodied actors to play those rather than finding actors who can represent that disability from their own experience. And so it's just another opportunity for representation on the big screen, the small screen, wherever. And so, I don't know, I commend Don Cheadle for kind of addressing that and thinking about it, obviously, and out of the circumstances of what his character went through. Speaking of celebrities speaking out and advocating, Iggy Azalea spoke out for transgender equality at Chicago's Pride in the Park. This is June 30th, which means it is the end of Pride Month. Azalea took the time out of she took a moment, during her performance at Chicago's Pride in the Park, this was yesterday, to speak out on transgender equality. She recently announced details about her second album, In My Defense, but she paused during her set at Butler Field to discuss the meaning and importance of pride events around the world. She's quoted as saying, "To a lot of people, you guys are still invisible, and you have to fight every day just to be who you are. That's why we've got to be here tonight, because we've got to be loud as F. This shows you exist and you are valid." She then began telling the story of a special fan named Michelle, who is a trans woman of color. "I see the struggle she goes through every day just to be herself, just to walk out the door. That, SHIT, that I have the privilege to do every day," she said before rattling off some statistics about what it is like to be trans, especially a trans person of color. That can be very, very scary. She went on to say, "I want to read everybody that's going to watch this online statistics quickly about trans people that a lot of people need to hear. 50% of trans people," and then she went on to describe them. It involves a lot of sexual assault and assault in general, and most trans students feel unsafe at school. She went on to reveal that so far this year, 11 trans women of color have died, and that trans women of color tend to have a life expectancy of about 35 years old. So she was definitely being an advocate, using her very public opportunity to advocate and speak her truth and speak on behalf of those who have more of a voice than they've had in the past, but maybe not as much as they would like. And it turns out that on World Pride Day, Lil Nas X opened up about his sexuality, revealing to his followers on Twitter that he is a member of the LGBTQ community. He posted the video for his song, I have no idea, Closure, but with a 7 instead of an L, and urged fans to listen closely to the lyrics, writing, "Some of y'all already know, some of y'all don't care, some of y'all not going FWN no more, but before this month ends, I want y'all to listen closely to Closure," and added a rainbow emoji. So yeah, he followed up that tweet by posting his album artwork, zoomed in on a rainbow in the image. He said, in a word I won't use on the podcast, "Thought I made it obvious," he wrote. So apparently he didn't make it obvious as obvious as he thought he did, but he chose this moment to come out and just that he is part of the LGBT community, and that's enough. So that is probably also enough for this segment. Currently, we are going to take our second break of the podcast, and when we come back, talking about some movie news. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Entertainment Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Welcome back to the GSMC Entertainment Podcast. As I said before the break,
We're going to look at some music news before we wrap up this episode. And the first story is about Aladdin, which has been out for a few weeks now, and it has become Will Smith's highest grossing film, which has been cool, or which is cool. Disney's Aladdin has brought in around $824 million at the global box office. This is according to Uproxx. Will Smith, who plays the genie, took to Instagram to thank fans for seeing the film. He said, "To be in this game as long as I've been in this game and to have my biggest movie at this point in my career, I just want to say thank you." The film is now Smith's highest grossing film, beating the box office numbers for Independence Day, which is amazing because that was huge when it came out. And his Instagram video thanked fans and featured him saying thank you in several languages. So that is very cool. He seems like an interesting guy, and it was nice of him to thank fans for that. So Aladdin is doing very well, and my parents own a movie theater in my tiny hometown, and they are running Aladdin this weekend. And my mom said it's okay, it's pretty good. She said it's pretty good, which from my mom, anything other than if my mom says it's good, watch the movie, because you only get about 5% of it's good from her. Most of the time it's like or worse. So if you haven't already seen Aladdin, go see it. I have not seen it yet, but I need to do that. Other movie news, and that is that the movie Yesterday is now out. I haven't seen this one yet either, but I want to. I love the Beatles, and this one looks really interesting. It is about a world where the Beatles never existed, and so the main character he wakes up one morning. He's been a fan and a singer of Beatles songs for a long time, it sounds like, from the trailer, and he wakes up one morning and they never existed. He's the only one that remembers the Beatles, so he starts singing their songs again, as he has been doing, and people are just blown away. The director, Danny Boyle, and the screenwriter, who is Richard Curtis, sent the film to the two surviving members of the Beatles, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, of course, to see what they thought of the movie. And apparently they liked it. I mean, you can understand Danny Boyle's desire for their approval. If he's a huge Beatles fan, you would want their approval, even if you're not a huge Beatles fan, but you just made a movie about the Beatles or about their music, and you would probably want to know their feedback. So he reached out and got encouraging responses. Andrea Mandel of USA Today had the chance to speak with Danny Boyle, who said, "We sent everyone the finished film, and we got a lovely message from Ringo and Barbara, and a lovely message back from Olivia," that's George's widow. "I don't think Paul's seen the film yet, but he saw and liked the trailer." So that is encouraging. And it would be, it'll be interesting to hear Paul's thoughts on the movie. Not sure if it was sent to Yoko Ono or if she has made a comment that's just not mentioned in this article. That at least I didn't see a comment about her. But if they sent it to George's widow, I would assume that they would send it to John's widow, Yoko Ono. But at any rate, it'll be interesting, as I said, to see what Paul has to say, if anything, and I can't wait to see the movie because I love the Beatles, I love their music, and the preview intrigues me, and made me laugh in very weird ways that made my husband tell me I was a nerd. Was that this podcast where I was talking about my husband calling me a nerd? I don't know. It doesn't matter. He does it all the time. Yeah, he means it in a loving way. But at any rate, let's move on to something else that possibly may also get me accused of being a nerd. No, maybe not. The next story is that RoboCop is coming back. Whew, the 80s and the 90s, all the movies are coming back. So director Neil Blomkamp is currently developing a sequel to the first 1987 RoboCop movie. And apparently this movie will feature the original suit. I've only seen parts of RoboCop, to be honest with you. I did not watch it. in 1987. I was in junior high. It was not really my cup of tea. He said, so on Twitter, Blomkamp said, script is being written, going well. Imagine watching Verhoeven do a follow-up film. Another fan questioned if that means the original suit will be used, and he confirmed 1,000,000% original. So there you go. And there is a picture of the suit. Details for this include that it appears to be ignoring any of the other RoboCop sequels and is focusing on being a sequel to that original RoboCop. And I cannot speak knowledgeably about this because I have not seen any of the RoboCop movies, so I apologize if you are a fan and you are screaming at the podcast right now saying, what the heck? At any rate, there is going to be a new RoboCop movie. It is going to be a sequel to the first one, apparently, and the original suit is going to be used. So, apparently, I don't know if the original suit is going to be used or if it's going to be updated at all, but we'll just have to wait and see. Finally, in more sequel, reboot, resurrecting the 80s and the 90s movies news, Back to the Future 4. Not actually happening, but if it did, Christopher Lloyd has said that he would love to return as Doc Brown if a Back to the Future 4 ever happened. He's 80 now. He said at Niagara Falls Comic-Con, that's a tricky deal because you don't want to do another one and disappoint. So I don't know. I'd be happy to for myself, but we'll see. He continues to say that if a fourth Back to the Future movie ever sees the light of day, it would need to convey a universal message like the first three films. Specifically, Lloyd says, I think somehow it needs to kind of convey a message about something that's important to everyone, universally, like climate change, some way of incorporating whatever fever is going on at the moment into the film, and keep the feeling of 1, 2, and 3. So, what does he think of co-star Michael J. Fox rejoining the party? Christopher Lloyd says his Parkinson's, he has it, but it's kind of, so what? He just moves ahead. It's very cool. A couple of months ago, there was like a bunch of us, Back to the Future cast, Tom Wilson and Leah Thompson. We had a panel with all of us, and Michael just goes forth and talks, breaks people up, so it's very cool. So he's saying he's open to it, but it would need to have the right message. With everything else that's being remade and sequels and reboots and all those things, who knows? It could happen. It doesn't seem to be on the table right now, but you just never know. And, wow, I still can't believe Christopher Lloyd is 80. It makes sense. Of course he's 80. I mean, the first one came out in 1987. He wasn't a spring chicken. I mean, it's not like he was 20 then. Sometimes time just gets away from me and I forget how much time has passed between things. So on that note, let's wrap this up before I start feeling really old. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the GSMC podcast, the GSMC Entertainment Podcast. Join me again next time when we'll find out what else is going on in the world of entertainment. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.